Remy LeBeau, aka Gambit, is a powerful mutant and one of the most prominent X-Men, especially thanks to the X-Men 92 series. However, we know very little about his mutation's origins. Can you believe it? Most X-Men have a very clear story when it comes to the moment they develop their abilities, but not Gambit's. We know his biokinetic abilities first appeared when he was barely a teenager, and for a while there, he avoided telling his loved ones about it. Funnily enough, contrary to most of his peers, he didn't exactly freak out. Instead, he would practice when he was alone, perfecting the skill. Finally, as shown in Gambit Volume 3, Issue 6, May 1999, Remy got to show his new abilities when he was 15, after he and his cousin Etienne Marceau were kidnapped and sold to the villain known as Pig. Pig planned to sell Remy and Etienne to Hydra so that this villainous association would turn them into boy soldiers. However, Remy was able to charge a playing card dropped by Etienne, blinding Pig just enough for them to escape. This would become his signature move. It makes sense that Gambit didn't feel that he would lose his life once he came out as a mutant like others did. He was already an outcast. In fact, Remy was an outcast for his whole life. As revealed in Gambit Volume 3, Issue 1, the moment he was born, Remy's parents abandoned him at the hospital, frightened by his red eyes. The New Orleans Thieves Guild saved him from not having a family in an ironic circumstance. They kidnapped him. The gang was convinced that Remy would be the child to unite all guilds in New Orleans, an event that had been prophesied for a while. So Remy grew up with the New Orleans Thieves Guild. Jean-Luc LeBeau, the leader of the guild, saw his potential when 10-year-old Remy tried to pick his pocket, so he basically adopted him. With the Thieves Guild, Remy honed his powers and became better at stealth and stealing. However, staying a criminal was never his fate. Remy killed the wrong person and was exiled. We'll talk about it in a while, but for now, you should know that he traveled the world alone for a while until the day he crossed paths with Storm in Uncanny X-Men Volume 1, Issue 266, June 1990. But this wasn't the Storm we all know and love. She had been transformed by the Shadow King. Thanks to the Shadow King's mind control, Storm thought she was a child thief, so Remy saw her as one of them. He hurried and helped her deal with the villain. Eventually, when the villain's influence wore off, Storm vouched for him with the X-Men. Gambit and Storm's friendship has remained an important part of Remy's journey throughout his time with the X-Men, as they both have supported each other for decades now. This would be the beginning of his long story with the X-Men. Since that day, he has been an important member of the team, living many different adventures alongside them. Remy's mutation is basically energy conversion. He can transform any energy into a new type of energy. Given this, he can take the potential energy of every object and turn it into kinetic energy. By doing this, he can turn anything in his hands into a bomb. Gambit could make a big bomb with his hands. However, he chooses to use small objects because they are way easier to throw as well as faster to charge. This is the biggest limitation on Gambit's ability. The bigger the object, the longer it takes for them to charge. Of course, in the heat of the battle, time is obviously a big factor, so it makes sense that Remy prefers to be fast. Another important limitation of Gambit's powers is the need for skin contact. In order for him to charge anything, he needs to be in direct contact with it. Besides, his powers don't work on organic matter. He can't charge a person or animal to explode, at least not usually. Instead, when touching living beings, Gambit alters their sensory awareness, basically scrambling their brains so they are very confused and then knocked out. Now, melting things and confusing people aren't the only things Gambit's powers do. Since he can manipulate the energy of anything surrounding him, he can alter molecules in certain ways. For example, he can completely disintegrate things. Not only does he use his energy to make things explode, but he can also melt them. By keeping the energy on the playing cards he throws, Gambit can turn them into the most dangerous kind of knife ever. They can cut through steel. No joke. Since delaying the charge is a common skill for him, this is a standard move for the Cajun. Additionally, he can use his energy skills to create static. In fact, his body is always emitting it, which means most telepaths can't access his brain. Besides, Gambit can emit shockwaves created through vibration, causing small earthquakes or even mini craters. He uses this vibration to charge weapons that, instead of exploding, will release their energy upon impact. Gambit's last amazing skill has nothing to do with his energy conversion skills. This is his hypnotic charm. Gambit's voice can influence others' minds thanks to the psionic energy he can harness. This allows him to alter the emotions of others or even influence their decisions. One of the most important things in Gambit's life is his relationship with Rogue, whom he met when he joined the X-Men. Gambit, a suave Cajun by nature, started flirting with the Southern mutant, but Rogue ignored him, likely because she was too closed off to intimacy due to her abilities. However, it became obvious they had tension when the Shadow King influenced them to act without inhibitions, and they started making out. When the effect passed, Remy actually tried to talk with Rogue, explain his feelings were real, and maybe start a relationship. However, she didn't remember anything about the whole ordeal. Gambit kept flirting with her anyway, and Rogue actually reciprocated, first as a joke, then for real, until they fell in love. Things were complicated at first, and you probably guessed why. Rogue's powers made it impossible for her and Gambit to touch her. It was a difficult time for both of them, especially because Gambit's past as a thief also kept getting in the way. Rogue and Gambit met in 1991 and spent 3 years on a will they won't they until X-Men issue 41 in December 1994. That was 3 years of tension unresolved. Then they finally kissed. With the world ending in an apocalyptic event, they decided to take the chance. After all, they were going to die. Alas, the world didn't end, and Rogue absorbed Gambit's powers and personality. She became a suave Cajun, thieving around. Things got so difficult for her that she ended up escaping the X-Men for a while. This left Gambit heartbroken. Then Rogue returned, but again, Gambit left. You need to understand that both Rogue and Gambit were deeply complicated people at the time. They loved each other, but there were many things keeping them apart. In August 2000, almost a whole decade after they first met, and around 7 years after they kissed for the first time, Rogue and Gambit finally embraced their relationship in Uncanny X-Men issue 385, August 2000. This is the moment they finally became an item. Of course, like all relationships, they had highs and lows. Some were normal, like jealousy and forced distance, but others were things only the X-Men could experience. Like Gambit becoming Herald of Galactus and Horseman of Apocalypse, or Rogue ending in a coma after a big battle. Sadly, even after all this time, they weren't able to touch each other. Rogue's abilities were often out of her control, and she would absorb Gambit's life force with any light touch. Even a small kiss would leave Gambit incapacitated for a long time, which was terrible news, considering he's a true asset for the X-Men. In the aftermath of Messiah Complex, Professor X finally helped Rogue control her abilities. This happened around 2010. Rogue and Gambit had been together for almost 14 years when physical contact became a normal thing for them. However, this was not the happy ending everyone expected. Instead, Rogue left Gambit for Magneto. This was one of the weirdest moments in Marvel. Fortunately, it didn't last long. Rogue's brief affair with Magneto led to a 6-year-long break between Rogue and Gambit. This is the longest they have been apart since they became a thing. 6 years after their breakup, they saw each other again when the Shadow King put the X-Men community in danger. Following their victory against this villain, Kitty Pryde tasked them to go undercover as a couple on a couple's therapy retreat in Rogue and Gambit issue 1, January 2018. This adventure rekindled the feelings Rogue and Gambit had for each other. Not only this, but the villain, Charmaine Grand, stole their memories and had them experience each other's perspectives. This action actually made their relationship stronger than before. This was key for them to finally stop tippy-toeing around their own feelings, instead embracing their love, this time for real. No longer after this, they got married in X-Men Gold Volume 2, Issue 30, June 2018. The issue originally seemed to be a celebration of the wedding of Kitty Pryde and Colossus, but Kitty decided that she wasn't ready for marriage at the last minute. However, Remy, caught up in the romance and his love for Rogue, decided to propose to her, and she said yes. The couple married in the issue instead, finally giving fans the Gambit and Rogue wedding they'd been hoping for. This happened in 2018, and they have remained an item ever since. Rogue and Gambit are unarguably one of the most incredible power couples, and no matter what comes their way, they will be able to take any villain down together. Before Rogue, there was another woman who had Gambit's heart. As revealed in X-Men Origins Gambit Volume 1, Issue 1, June 2009, it was a woman whom he met when they were only kids, Belladonna Boudreaux. The problem? Belladonna was the daughter of Marius Boudreaux, the leader of the Assassin's Guild. Since this gang was the direct rival of the Thieves Guild, Remy and Belladonna were like Romeo and Juliet. Their love couldn't be, so they let it go, until they were a bit older. A little bit before he joined the X-Men, Remy and Belladonna met again. This time they got a chance at happiness since the two guilds planned an arranged marriage for them to unify the two gangs. However, Belladonna's brother, Julian, refused. Remember that we told you Remy had killed someone once, which had led to his exile? Well, Julian challenged Remy to a duel to defend his sister's honor. He was convinced the unification of both guilds wasn't the right choice. Besides, he didn't want his own blood dating someone from the dishonorable Thieves Guild. So, they fought. And of course, thanks to his mutant abilities, Gambit killed him easily. And even though it was in self-defense, the Thieves Guild exiled him. This was the thief's attempt at keeping peace between both groups, so Gambit accepted. However, he had to leave Belladonna behind, since he knew she wouldn't be happy far from her people. Belladonna returned to Remy's life. This time it wasn't as a lover, but as an uncommon ally. When the Brood attacked the guilds, Belladonna sought Gambit and the X-Men's help to deal with them. However, Rogue accidentally touched her in Gambit Volume 1, Issue 4, January 1994. This made Belladonna turn against Rogue, so Gambit had to defend her. The villain has tried to kill Gambit a couple of times out of resentment, but she has never been able to take him down. Most superheroes have an arch-enemy. Likely Gambit's is Nathaniel Essex, aka Mr. Sinister. They don't have this Superman Lex Luthor kind of relationship. But Essex has hurt Gambit deeply, so much that the mutant is committed to not letting him win. Their first encounter took place when Gambit was really young. As a member of the Thieves Guild, Gambit was tasked with recovering Mr. Sinister's diary from the Weapon X facilities, as shown in Weapon X, First Class Volume 1, Issue 3, January 2009. When Gambit witnessed the many horrible experiments taking place in this place, as well as the many villainous plans in Essex's diary, he burned the book. From that moment on, Gambit kept Mr. Sinister at arm's length. However, he still had certain contact with him. For example, when trying to understand his powers, Remy sought the villain's help to control them. As shown in Uncanny X-Men Volume 1, Issue 350, October 1997, Essex removed some of Gambit's brain tissue, making him less powerful. Gambit felt in debt to Sinister, so he did several jobs for him, even assembling a team of mercenaries. It didn't take long before Gambit realized Sinister's plans were, well, sinister. In fact, Mr. Sinister tricked him into killing the Morlocks, an underground community of mutants in New York. Gambit cut all ties with Essex at that moment, but Sinister kept coming back to remind him of his villainous past. The villain found different ways to return to Gambit's life, even helping him with certain benefits sometimes. For example, when Gambit became one of the Horsemen of Apocalypse, Sinister offered him help to escape Apocalypse's control. After this, Sinister blackmailed Gambit into doing his bidding forever, but Gambit betrayed him. It was around this time that Remy actually thwarted Sinister's resurrection alongside his allies. Since then, the villain hasn't bothered the mutant anymore, but it's fine. Gambit is more than ready to deal with him if things get hard. Remy eventually abandoned the Thieves Guild after a long time, but this organization remained as an important core of his persona. After all, this is where he was raised. In fact, Gambit tried to do other stuff. At some point following a fallout with the X-Men, Remy even tried teaching at Jean Grey School for Higher Learning starting in X-Men, Regenesis Volume 1, Issue 1, October 2011. However, he soon realized the school environment wasn't for him, so he returned to thieving. This time around, Gambit didn't act just as a thief. He had been fighting alongside the X-Men for years, so he is way more attuned to the injustice in the world. Now he wasn't just a thief, but a hero among them. This unified all guilds in a way. Gambit inspired them all and helped them too. Given this, his own father forced him to try and become the leader of all thieves in the world. Of course, there were still plenty of thieves against Remy uniting all guilds, like the Technopath Neil, the Clairvoyant Ajna, and the Shapeshifter Slips. All of them wanted to be guildmasters, so Remy was a threat to them. Still, Gambit had no problem overpowering them, rising to the occasion and taking the world's guildmaster title in Gambit Volume 5, Issue 17, September 2015. Remember the prophecy? It was true. Gambit grew up to become the one to unite the guilds. And although Gambit is incredibly beloved as a hero, he has had terrible luck when it comes to movie and TV adaptations. The hero debuted on the big screen in 2009. He appeared in the X-Men Origins Wolverine movie portrayed by Taylor Kitsch. In the film, he was an uncommon ally to Logan. However, since the X-Men Fox universe lost strength right after the beginning of the MCU, Kitsch never returned to the role. In 2014, Channing Tatum signed to portray the character in a spin-off of the Wolverine film. Tatum pushed for the movie, excited about it. However, the plans for filming it were canceled in 2019. It's truly sad. The movie spent 5 years in development hell, only to become dust.
They call me the Gambit.
Around 10 years after the movie was planned, the MCU finally did it some justice. Deadpool and Wolverine brought Tatum on the role, finally allowing him to fulfill one of his dream roles.
In third grade, throwing playing cards at my friends in the living room.
And fans obviously thought he did amazing.
And you were unbelievable, dude.
Tatum did such a great job of portraying Remy that Marvel Studios decided to bring him back. Tatum will portray Gambit in Avengers Doomsday 2026. We still don't know if he will be another variant of the character or the same one from Deadpool and Wolverine, especially since the movie implied that he died in the Void alongside Elektra and Blade, fighting Cassandra Nova's armies. However, a deleted end scene also implied that Gambit survived, escaping through a portal that could have brought him to another universe in the multiverse. Only time will tell what Remy's role in Avengers Doomsday will be. Who isn't excited to see the great Gambit make it into the MCU beyond a small role? What's more, there's no way of knowing if Tatum will actually take on the role in the future. We know the mutant saga is on its way. However, there's absolutely no information on it yet. Tatum's Gambit may not return at all. Still, Gambit should be a part of the first ever original X-Men roster in the MCU, don't you think? Would you like to see Gambit in the MCU beyond the multiverse saga? And if the answer is yes, would you like to see Channing Tatum in the role, or do you think it's time to recast him? Let us know in the comments, and remember to subscribe. Until next time. Thanks for watching, CBR.